The hostess tried not to look at the empty chair when she set down the water, but Naya saw the flick of her eyes anyway, quick as a moth. The bistro breathed in low jazz and clinks of glass, a February night pressing its cheek to the windows until the panes filmed with breath. Candlelight jittered in small glass cups, steadying itself between drafts. Naya smoothed the navy dress she'd taken in by hand, small darts at the waist, a hem that brushed her knee like a promise kept to no one but herself. She'd counted bus fare, rent, and the tiny emergency fund folded twice in her wallet. She could afford tea. She could maybe afford soup if she left the tip like a prayer. She could not afford to be foolish. Hope, tonight, would have to split the check with sense. The phone on the table blinked its flat, unhelpful face. 6:58 p.m. She'd come early on purpose. Being early let you breathe without witnesses. She arranged her hands in her lap, the way Grandma Ola had taught her when the world was too big, palms down to ground, palms up to receive. Aromas drifted from the kitchen, lemon on hot steel, garlic growing brave in oil, basil scissored into ribbons. Somewhere near the bar, someone laughed with their whole mouth. The laugh shook a strand of tiny lights and made them tremble. At 7:07, the door opened. She looked up without letting herself look like she was looking. A couple, a man with snow in his beard, a delivery driver, no one with the half-smile from the app profile, taken in a bathroom mirror that pretended to be a hotel. She brushed a thumb along the glass of her water. She decided on the app 3 weeks ago after deleting it twice. Be brave, she'd told her reflection. Be specific. Be the kind of woman who shows up even when she knows the ending. At 7:12, the text landed like a heel on a soft fruit. Lol, you actually went? I was joking. Save the table for someone cute. Words can be temperature. These were cold. They moved through her like air from a bus door in January, taking heat from fingers first. The room thinned. The candle flame sharpened to an obedient point. Naya set the phone down face first, as if it might take the cue and learn manners. She looked at the empty chair and made it a fact, not a wound. The old instinct rose to fold herself smaller, to make the dress a cave, to become a photograph no one had framed. She pressed her knees together, shoes aligned like answers on a test. Hot water with lemon? The server asked, gentle without pity. Please, Nia said, and did not recognize the steady in her voice as anything but muscle memory. Breath in 4 counts. Hold 2. Out 6. She found the breath the way you locate a light switch in a dark room you know by heart. Across the aisle, a man in a charcoal sweater looked from his drink to her hands and back again. He had the tiredness of someone whose day had measured itself in decisions other people would second-guess tomorrow. His scotch was the color of late afternoon. He watched her lift her chin by degrees, like a weight training itself lighter. He watched without performing concern, as if observation could be respect when it was quiet enough. The hot water arrived with a lemon slice floating like a small sun. She wrapped the cup in both hands and let heat climb her knuckles into her wrists. A slow thaw she did not rush. Maybe she would ask to box whatever bread they'd bring and take it home to become breakfast with butter and salt. Maybe she would sit until the room forgot about her and then leave and be no one's embarrassment but her own. She pictured the walk back to the apartment. Stoop lights, a dog pulling its owner toward a hydrant, the train shivering underground, and felt the city's indifferent mercy. It didn't care if you were humiliated. It offered another block anyway. Before she could stand, a plate of pasta landed softly in front of her, steam lifting in ribbons that smelled like the neighborhood you wish hunger had grown up in. Garlic, tomato, a clean punch of basil, a glass of sparkling lemonade followed, bright as a summer word said in winter. I didn't order this, she said automatically, looking up. It's taken care of, the server said. No strings. She tilted her head toward no one in particular. From a neighbor. Naya hesitated. Pride is the last clean shirt. She smoothed its collar. Then her stomach argued for jurisdiction, reminding her of shifts that skipped dinner and mornings that had started with coffee alone. She picked up the fork. The first bite was heat and salt and the kind of kindness that doesn't say its name out loud. She felt it bloom behind her sternum, a warmth that was not relief exactly, but something that reached for relief the way a plant reaches past blinds for light. She didn't look around right away. She ate as if the act were a sentence she intended to finish. Somewhere halfway through, a deep exhale left her lungs like something she'd been holding since the front doorbell had chimed at 6:45. She dabbed her lip with her napkin. She lifted the lemonade. Bubbles burst on her tongue. The lemon was a small shock that argued successfully against despair. When she finally let her gaze travel, it moved like a thoughtful tourist. Room, bar, kitchen door, window, the dark outside carrying its own reflections. The man in the charcoal sweater had not turned toward her, which felt like the exact right size of grace. He had one hand around his glass, the other on the table beside a phone he refused to wake. He looked at the window as if considering weather not just outside but in. Nia looked at the empty chair again. It was just a chair. She took another bite to confirm it. The pasta cooled from scalding to perfect to almost warm. She honored each weather with attention. The server checked once with a glance that asked and answered simultaneously. Nia found, to her own quiet surprise, that she was not ashamed. She was hungry. She was here. She was eating dinner in a dress that fit because she'd made it fit. By the time she stood to leave, the room had shuffled its cast. New laughter had taken the old laughter's chair. Coats were buttoned up to chins. A woman by the bar tucked a curl behind her ear and then put it back where it had wanted to be. Nia asked for the check and got a slip of paper with a line across it that made zeros a kind of blessing. She slid a tip under the edge of the plate that was not generous but was honest, the way you return a library book on time because you respect systems that let everyone read. At the door, she paused. The man in the charcoal sweater lifted his eyes for the first time and met hers with the sort of look that doesn't rehearse itself. No smile auditioned for the part of savior. No nod demanded gratitude. It was a look like a door left ajar, there if you needed it, not a trap, not a trick. She touched 2 fingers to the rim of her cup in a gesture that could have been a thank you if anyone wanted to translate it. Outside, Brooklyn's cold put its hand on her face and called her by her given name. She walked the 6 blocks to her place with her shoulders squared and her scarf tucked properly into her coat. A saxophone practiced one stubborn phrase somewhere above a bodega that smelled like oranges and soap. A bus sighed at the corner, letting out heat, and a woman carrying lilies too white for February. Nia climbed her stoop, and on the mat that always tried to curl at the corner, she stopped and looked up at the slice of moon. She did not ask it for anything. She said, with the conviction of a person claiming even their small mercies, "Thank you." In the kitchen, she rinsed her cup, set it upside down, and placed her wallet beside Grandma Ola's note. "You are not small." She slid the blank check with its line of grace into the fold with her bus pass. Tomorrow she would wake at 5:20, braid her hair, count the till, steam the milk, listen for the hiss that meant she had the angle right. Tonight, she stood in the quiet apartment that held her and breathed the way she'd learned to do in rooms that didn't. The candle she lit on the table smelled like citrus and something green. She let it burn. She let herself be the woman who had eaten dinner because a neighbor had insisted that dignity included warm food. She washed her face, pressed cream into her cheekbones, and set the navy dress over the chair where she could see it in the morning like a small, stubborn flag. The apartment held the kind of quiet that remembers other rooms. Steam lifted from the kettle like a soft ribbon and disappeared against the dark window. Nia poured hot water over a tea bag in the chipped mug with strawberries that had survived 3 moves and a dozen sink drops. The cotton of the navy dress grazed her calf where she draped it over the chair, thread she'd pulled, retucked, taught to behave. On the table, the slip from the bistro lay beside her bus pass, and the note in Grandma Ola's slanted hand. "You are not small." She touched the paper, its edges softened by years of being folded, unfolded, returned to the wallet that held breath and rent money. She had learned early how to stretch a day. At 9, she stood on a stool at her grandmother's stove, sleeves rolled, the hiss of onions a drumbeat under the radio choir. "Palms down when you worry," Grandma said, pressing Nia's hands to the table. "Feel the wood. See, the world's still here." They shared peaches over the sink, juice running down forearms. On Sunday evenings they ironed dresses smooth, the steam puffing like a church sigh. Later, lying in the small bedroom with paint that needed a second coat, Nia listened to the train mutter and counted. Breath in 4, hold 2, out 6. The counting made the ceiling a companion instead of a witness. Her mother's laugh had been a sudden thing, bright and quick, startling the room like a bird. It lived in old photos on the dresser, cheekbones that matched Nia's, a gaze that warmed when it landed on someone she loved. Illness arrived with the particular rudeness of envelopes, labs and coded words, the fluorescent hum of waiting rooms. Nia learned hospital geography, vending machines that sold sandwiches wrapped in a sadness of plastic, elevators that moved too slowly for worry. She learned to translate doctor speak into what do we do now and how much. She learned which pockets in her coat held the smallest, cleanest hope. After the funeral, lilies in a room that had never smelled of lilies before, she and Grandma cleared the apartment with the pragmatism grief forces on people who do not have money for sentiment. "Keep what holds you," Grandma said. They kept the mug with strawberries, the navy dress from a church basement sale, the note. There were years that built themselves out of lists. Morning at the pediatric clinic, the click of appointment slots like a metronome, mothers with exhausted eyes and toddlers with too much energy at 8:15 a.m. Nia learned the rhythms of insurance hold music, the patience required to coax an authorization from a person who only knew policy numbers. She added a soft word at the end of every call, no script required. "We'll make it work." Evenings at the cafe, steam and foam, the bell's half-hearted ring, the low gospel of the grinder. She could read a customer's day by the way they set down a phone. The man with paint on his sleeves needed a lid that wouldn't pop. The biology student with the cracked screen needed a napkin and a reminder she was not made of exams. With each shift change, Nia tucked another 5 into the envelope behind the flour canister and wrote the new number on an index card. Rent, electric, Metro card. She never wrote date, not because the line item cost too much, but because it asked for a kind of inventory she couldn't afford. There had been a man once, years before the app and the bathroom mirror half-smile. He'd been good on paper and careful with words until life leaned hard on the table. When her mother's bills multiplied, when her sleep broke into pieces, when Nia stopped having the energy for the performance of easy, he drifted toward lighter rooms. "You're so strong," he'd said as if narrating her from the hall. She learned to hear that phrase as both compliment and abdication. She did not rehearse resentment, she refiled the lesson. After he left, she deleted every photo but the ones that held people who still stayed when the refrigerator clicked on at 3 a.m. When she downloaded the app again, it was with the same practical gamble she used at the laundromat when she fed the dryer quarters and hoped it wouldn't stop with clothes still damp. "Be brave," she told her reflection. Not performative brave, the quiet kind. She took 3 selfies until one looked like a person she recognized. She wrote a simple bio that did not sell herself like a product. The messages were a familiar parade, too much, too little, a few decent, one sweet. Alex suggested the bistro with the votive candles and the menu that read like aspiration. She did the math, found room for tea, maybe soup, circled the date on her calendar in pencil and a small heart no one else would see. The text at 7:12 did not surprise her as much as it insulted the part of her that still believed people should try not to harm what is fragile. Some hurts arrive like a slap. This one arrived like a draft, chill creeping under a door you thought was closed. She felt the old urge to shrink, to give the room back its air. Then the pasta arrived, steam and garlic and basil, and the kindness was not loud, which is why it worked. She ate like someone who'd remembered she had a body, and that bodies require warmth. Pride stood up, tried to argue. Dignity put a hand on its shoulder and said, "We're eating." In the kitchen now, she squeezed lemon into tea and let the scent turn the room into a place that forgave February. She opened a cabinet that squeaked on principle and took down a jar of lavender buds she'd bought for $2 at the corner store because the label had promised calm, in a script that made the word look like it meant it. She sprinkled a few into her palm, rubbed the scent into her wrists. She sat, phone face down, because no more worshiping at the altar of someone else's rudeness tonight, and opened the notebook where she kept 2 columns. Must and maybe. Must, rent, groceries, MetroCard, grandma's prescription refills. Maybe night class for medical billing at the community college, the good walking shoes, a little lamp for the bedside because reading by overhead light felt like a factory, and she wanted a room that told softer truth. She added a line under maybe, then crossed it out because the act of wanting had cost enough today. When she washed the cup, she watched how the suds caught light and made it their business to sparkle. Small work, masquerading as magic. She hummed the hymn Grandma Ola hummed when the news was bad, but the pot of beans was good. A melody that didn't promise outcomes, only accompaniment. The radiator clanged like it had opinions. The neighbor upstairs practiced a scale, then gave up. She could hear the resignation in the stopped. By the bed, the navy dress hung from the chair back, a flag of refusal to vanish. She ran her fingers over the stitching she'd taught herself from a YouTube video and a memory of Grandma's patient hands turning seams to obedience. She remembered a day at 16 in a DMV line that became a thesis on waiting. A woman behind the counter told a girl with braids her name didn't look right on the form. Naya leaned in and said, "It looks right to me." And the woman blinked, recalibrated, stamped. She remembered a Tuesday at 19 when the nurse couldn't find her mother's vein, and Nia looked away and counted breath and learned to be there without breaking. She remembered last winter when the lights went out for 3 hours because the building was old and the wind new, and she lit a candle and read in its circle and did not call anyone because there was no one to call who would not arrive with a narrative attached. She lay down and set the alarm for 5:20. Before turning off the lamp, she unlocked her phone and scrolled without scrolling, looking at nothing in particular as a way of avoiding looking at anything in particular. A headline about a startup she would never buy from, a photo of a friend's baby with cheeks that dared you not to smile, a video of someone teaching a dance that required both knees to be less honest than hers. She closed the screen. The room rearranged itself into shapes that knew how to be dark. Sleep came in edges, then center. In the half place before morning, she dreamed she was standing inside a hummingbird's wing, the frantic clarity, the impossible work of staying in one gorgeous place. She woke with the certainty that the day would ask her to be a small engine again. She was ready. The kettle would sing, the bus would sigh, the grinder would gospel. Somewhere, a neighbor she did not know had decided dignity included warm food. Somewhere, a man with tired around his eyes had looked at the window the way she sometimes did and chosen quiet respect over performance. The world would not remember this. The world did not need to. She would. She would carry it like a folded receipt next to a bus pass and a note that said what it needed to say and nothing more. You are not small. The bell on the cafe door had a tired ring, like it had been faithful too long and didn't mind saying so. Morning spilled in with it. Construction boots crusted with salt, a nurse in blue scrubs with a lanyard full of keys, a kid with a Saks case and sleep still parked in his eyes. Naya tied her apron, tucked her braids into a soft knot, and stepped into the choreography her body knew. Grind, tamp, lock, pull, steam, tilt, listen, wipe, set, smile. The steam wand hissed the way a cat guards its dignity. She loved that sound. It meant heat and making and a small miracle rescued from beans and patience. The window glass carried a fine fog from outside's breath. The sun hadn't committed yet, just sent a pale suggestion into the room. She placed 2 mugs under the spouts and watched twin streams turn the air into a richer brown. She could tell a bad day by how a customer set a phone down. She could tell a tender one by the way someone counted change twice and then bought the croissant anyway. She didn't judge. She learned. At 7:02, the door opened again and a small voice announced itself to the pastry case. "They're swirly," it said with authoritative joy. Nia looked up. A little girl in a mustard yellow sweater, legs in bright red tights, palms flat to the glass as if blessing the cinnamon rolls. Beside her, the man from the bistro, last night's quiet neighbor, held the door with one hand and a backpack that looked like a bee with the other. He had traded his charcoal sweater for a navy blazer. The tired around his eyes remained, but it was the honest kind, earned, not affected. He guided the girl forward without hurrying her. The child's delight set their pace. "Good morning," he said when their turn arrived, voice low with sleep and something gentler beneath. He didn't perform surprise or recognition. He just offered the words like they were meant for the person behind the counter, not the idea of a barista. Up close, Nia saw a faint, shaved line at his jaw, the kind that happens when a razor nick is new. He smelled faintly of clean wool and oranges, the good kind from a store that stacks them like reasons. Morning, Nia returned, letting the word be the right size. She did not tug at the thread of last night. She didn't need to. It was stitched in already. The little girl tapped the glass. "Please, can we get the swirly?" She stretched the word like taffy. "And cocoa with cloud." "Cloud?" Nia asked, delighted by the language. "Whipped cream," the man translated, amused. "And an oat milk latte for me, please." "Oat milk," the girl echoed, solemn, like this was a house rule. "Good choice," Nia said. "Milk sings sweeter with oats." She caught herself and smiled. "At least that's what mine says." "Do you sing the milk?" the girl asked, wide-eyed every day. Nia leaned toward the steam wand. "It has favorite songs." "What songs?" The girl was scandalized that such information might exist without her. "Depends on the mood. Mondays, old R&B, Fridays, anything with hand claps." Nia set a tiny paper cup under the wand. "Today feels like a we will make it kind of morning, so something with a patient beat." The girl nodded, content. "I'm Ava," she declared, like a palindrome. "Nice to meet you, Ava, like a palindrome," Nia said, deadpan as a doctor. "I'm Nia. Not a palindrome, but it hums." Ava whispered this intelligence to her bee backpack, then turned it toward the case to share. Nia moved through the steps, shot pulled just shy of bitter, milk pitched to a temperature that forgave lips, cocoa dusted with a small kindness of cinnamon. She free-poured a heart on the latte, not because she had to, but because some mornings required proof. As she slid the mug across, the man's hand brushed the saucer's edge. He looked up, met Nia's eyes with that steady, performanceless attention she'd read as respect last night, and nodded once. The nod said, "I see you," without the hungry edge that sometimes attached to seeing. It made the breath behind her sternum settle like a bird choosing a branch. He paid with a black card that pretended not to be important. When he signed, his hand shook almost imperceptibly, a tremor that told a longer story. Too many decisions made in rooms with glass walls. He tucked the pen back into its tether with more care than such a pen deserved. Before he moved away, he hesitated. "Your pasta was better than my scotch," he said, wry a shade, as if humor were a muscle he'd been working back into form. "Thank you for accepting neighbors." "Thank you for ordering from them," Nia returned. "No one should go cold in a room with food." Ava blew across her hot chocolate like she'd trained at the Academy of Not Burning Tongues. She took one serious sip and sighed a sigh so honest, 3 people in line smiled without meaning to. "Middle bite first," Nia advised when she set the cinnamon roll on a plate. "Otherwise the spiral gets away from you." Ava gasped at the revelation and immediately complied, plunging her fork into the center like a rescue mission. They took the corner table under the window. Morning decided finally to show up for work. Light slid across the floor and climbed the table legs like a quiet cat. The cafe's playlist leaned into a bass line that made the steam wand purr. Nia kept moving, but her awareness found its way back to the pair at the window, the man unwinding from tight into human one bite at a time, the girl narrating pastry like it was breaking news. Something in the picture settled her, the way a well-made bed can settle a room. When the line thinned to 2 and the grinder caught its breath, Nia wiped a clean counter, habit more than need, and allowed herself the small luxury of watching. The man, father, it was clear in the way he cut the cinnamon roll so the middle magic got shared, checked his phone only once, winced at whatever flashed, then flipped it face down with a decision that looked deliberate. He said something that made the child laugh. He looked at his watch, then at the door, calculating a day that would not bend unless he bent it on purpose. He breathed in, out, the way people do when they are preparing to be both soft and steel. When they stood to leave, Ava waved at Nia with sticky hands. "Bye, Miss Not a Palindrome," she sang, bee backpack bouncing. "We're coming back on the day with hand claps." "Good," Nia said. "I'll save the claps." The man set a tip in the jar, paper folded compactly, the fold of someone who respected jars and the people who depended on them. He slid something else under the base of the jar so it wouldn't float away, white, rectangular, edges crisp. He nodded, that same small nod, and shepherded the small storm of his daughter toward the door. The bell rang their exit with its tired song. The morning rearranged around the space they left. Nia finished a latte leaf that didn't want to hold, and decided imperfection looked like a fern and was fine with that. When she finally reached to collect napkins and straighten the tip jar, she found the rectangle. A business card, black serif on heavy stock. Jaden Hale, founder and CEO, Little Loom Foods, email. Number. A minimal logo of thread looped into an infinity that could have been a child's drawing if the child had taste. On the back, in pencil smaller than the print, someone had written, "Thank you for last night. People don't always see." Heat rose in Naya's chest, not blush, not embarrassment, recognition. She turned the card over, let the letters assert themselves, then become just marks again. She thought of the boardrooms on the news where men like this stood beside charts that looked like skylines made of math. She thought of a father cutting a cinnamon roll into quarters of fairness. She slid the card into the same pocket where the bistro slip slept, beside Grandma's note folded to its familiar size. She did not let her mouth do what it wanted with the shape of a smile. Not yet. Not while the milk still needed singing and the line had opinions. Work returned to her hands. She tamped, she pulled, she listened. The morning grew muscle and then memory. At 8:17, a man in paint-spattered jeans asked if she'd seen his favorite travel mug. She had, and she'd kept it behind the counter because people needed continuity. At 8:41, the nurse with keys cried quietly into her sleeve between the espresso machine's kisses. Nia slid a napkin across and kept silence close by so the woman didn't have to perform her grief for an audience. At 9:03, a boy with a sax case played one tentative phrase after his Americano, and because kindness repeats itself, Nia clapped twice and called it jazz. It wasn't until her 10-minute break that she allowed the morning to approach with its meaning. She stepped into the alley behind the cafe where bread crates stacked like polite bricks, and the trash didn't smell terrible yet. The light here was honest. She texted no one, scrolled nowhere. She pulled the business card out again and read the pencil like a whisper. People don't always see. The sentence softened a corner in her chest where a bruise had been practicing permanence. She didn't know this man, not beyond cinnamon strategies and a quiet rescue in a room that could have made her disappear. She didn't know his life beyond the tired around his eyes and the way he didn't teach his daughter to rush through sweetness. But she knew this. He had chosen to see without spectacle, to give without costuming it as generosity, to nod like an equal, not a savior. In a city that measured attention like currency, that felt like the first honest dollar she'd touched in a while. She put the card away and went back in because the milk would not sing itself, and the day wasn't done asking for hands. The bell gave its weary ring. Nia wiped the counter, reset the cups, and stood ready for the next person who needed coffee or kindness or both. By Thursday, the square of light that the front window made on the cafe floor arrived like a regular, perfectly on time, laying itself over the corner table, as if reserving it for anyone willing to sit still long enough to be warmed. Jay took that table after drop-off, sleeves pushed to his forearms, laptop open but faced at an angle that told onlookers he was trying to earn a living without letting it eat him. He ordered oat milk again, a loyalty that made Nia trust him a fraction more. People who keep one small promise to themselves often keep others. Between rushes, their talk learned to walk. It started with weather and the peculiar habits of the steam wand, graduated to neighborhoods and bus routes. "Queens," he said when she asked. "Over a bodega that smelled like soap and oranges. We measured seasons by the fruit on the sidewalk." She told him about the apartment with the radiator that argued and the window that caught exactly 1 hour of decent sun as if on a timer. He asked what she read. She said paperbacks with cracked spines and short stories that didn't waste adjectives. He laughed like someone grateful to be reminded that language could be a meal. His phone chimed once, twice, a small chorus urging attention, then went silent because he made it. The quiet between pings was the good kind, not tense, not waiting to be broken. When Ava came on Wednesdays with a bee backpack and a report about the playground, "The slide is a liar because it looks fast, but it's not," Naya added a second swirl to the cocoa without being asked and cut the cinnamon roll so the middle didn't play favorites. Jay noticed the fairness, filed it in the mental drawer where you keep reasons to keep showing up. Mid-afternoon, the sink under the bar began to complain in a thin, persistent way, a whistle that announced a leak before it performed one. Naya twisted the handle with the casual threat of someone who had argued with worse. The sound kept on. Jay stood, looked at his watch, looked at the drip, then at her. "If I pretend I know how to fix that," he said, "will you pretend to believe me?" "I can pretend very well," she said, handing him the hex key from the drawer of everything. He knelt, a suit's knees learning the floor, and peered in with the focus of a person who had once assembled cheap furniture and found religion halfway through. Water misted his cheekbone. He blinked and laughed at himself without apology. She passed him a towel and, without fanfare, crouched beside him, shoulder to shoulder, holding the flashlight at the angle he meant before he asked. They worked like people raised by the same instructor in the rule of small fixes. Turn off the right valve, listen for the sigh of relief, hand the right wrench without making a speech about it. When the last drip gave up and the pipe settled into cooperation, he sat back on his heels and looked up at her from the floor, grinning in a way that let the tired around his eyes take a half day. "Look at us," he said. "Union of Plumbers Local 2. Don't slander the locals," she smiled. "They would never use this wrench." He stood, hands damp, wiped them on the towel, and for a moment simply held the towel without rushing to fold it. "I brought you something," he remembered, reaching for a canvas tote he'd set under the table. He placed a small, neatly packed assortment on the counter with the solemnity of a kid showing rocks he'd decided were fossils. Test kitchen run. Granola bites, fruit pouches, 2 labels that make the design team proud and mothers suspicious. Honesty requested. She picked one up, turned it over, read aloud the ingredients like a poem that didn't rhyme and therefore deserved more attention. She bit, let the bite sit, let her face not perform sweetness. "More oat," she said. "Less sweet. Kids know when you lie, parents too." She held up a pouch. "And this color says space food. Unless you're feeding astronauts, choose a color that looks like a kitchen exists." He laughed and wrote nothing down, the sort of listening that means notes later will be better. "We are feeding astronauts," he said, sobering a degree. 3-foot ones who negotiate like lawyers. He didn't say his daughter's name then. He didn't have to. It was under every sentence, the way a bass line keeps a song honest. Nia felt it without pushing at it, the gentle gravity that made him check the time and the door, and the fact that her cocoa swirls had become part of the choreography of a morning that needed landmarks. The next day, he came in with the same tote, emptier, and a flyer folded into eighths, crease lines like a map. "We're hosting a community thing Saturday," he said, suddenly less certain than any investor call could make him. "Allergen labeling, early childhood nutrition, dry slides, free snacks, the whole glamorous life. You don't have to." He caught himself. "If you wanted to come, your questions would make it better. If you don't, that's okay. No pressure." The last 2 words were written in pencil at the bottom of the flyer in his hand. She hadn't seen him write them, but there they were. "I work the morning," she said, folding the paper on the same seams he had, aligning the corners because some things deserved neatness. "I could come after if the bus decides to be reasonable." "The bus and I are in negotiations," he said. "We've agreed to disagree on Saturdays." He stayed an hour longer than his laptop justified. He told her in the spaces work left the story of a kitchen he'd rented with 2 friends when the company was only an optimistic name and a dented mixer. He talked about labeling laws with a fluency we reserve for things we've learned, because failing to could hurt somebody small. He told her about a launch that had gone badly and how it feels when a mother writes to say your product made her kid's day easier. You want to frame the email and also write back and tell her she's the one who did the miracle. She told him, carefully and then with more ease, the story of the clinic's waiting room at 8:15, of clipboards and pens that refused to make lines, of women who needed 10 minutes that the system had only given them 3. She told him about the way a child will relax when you speak to them first, not their chart, and how a name said right can be medicine you don't bill for. She told him she was thinking about billing certification at night, because the person who knows the papers sometimes gets to move the line a little faster. Do it, he said, not in the way people say do it, as if handing out permission they invented, but like someone who had watched an elevator door close and wished he'd held it. If you want it, I mean. I want a room that needs what I can do, she answered. I want to be useful on purpose. He nodded, a slow agreement with a piece of himself. There was a silence then, warm as a sweatshirt straight from the dryer, and they stood inside it without wrecking it with talk. Before he left, he reached for the tote again and pulled out a small jar with a label prototype so knew it had been cut by hand. Inside, a scatter of lavender-colored flakes floated in sugar like winter confetti. We were experimenting with lavender sugar for oat waffles, he said, suddenly shy. It's probably too much, but I thought. She took the jar and, without opening it, brought it close to her wrist like an old ritual. My grandmother would have said, "This is how you ask a kitchen to keep its promises," she murmured. What did she say about mornings? He asked. That they need naming, Nia said. She'd wake up and tell the room, "Today is a light through the blinds day," or "a gray in the ribcage day," and then the day would have to answer for itself. He smiled like someone who'd been given a tool. "Today is a square of sunlight on the floor day," he said, glancing at the window. They looked at the square together. The city went on with its sirens and schedules. Inside the cafe, a child at a corner table drew circles inside circles until the page nearly vibrated. Nia set the jar on the back counter, where the light could make it prettier than it already was. "Saturday," she said, tapping the folded flyer once, not as a promise to him, but to herself. He nodded as if accepting a gift from a ceremony he respected. When he left, the bell protested gently and then got over it. Nia slid the flyer into her wallet beside the bistro receipt, with its line of grace and the note in Grandma's hand that did not require interpretation. She wiped a counter that wasn't dirty and breathed the way you do when a room is beginning, very quietly, to feel like witness instead of audience. The milk sang for the next order. She listened close enough to hear the tune. Saturday wore a borrowed blue sky, the kind you don't trust until noon. After the morning rush, after the grinder's last gospel and the till's honest count, Nia folded her apron into her tote, smoothed the navy dress beneath her coat, and caught the B-43 to the community church on Franklin. The basement smelled like coffee that did its best and floor wax that had seen too many potlucks to be cynical. Folding chairs faced a screen where slides promised clarity in friendly fonts. On a long table, samples waited in neat rows. Fruit cups, granola bites, pouches lined up like little lungs, airless and hopeful. Mothers checked strollers like luggage, toddlers negotiated terms with gravity, a pair of grad students compared annotations with the seriousness of diplomats. Nia found a seat in the second row, not the first. She respected experts enough to give them eye contact, and herself enough to leave and exit. She opened her notebook. The pen in her hand felt like a vote. Jay stood near the back at first, giving the presenter room to be the voice. When he stepped forward to introduce the session, his suit looked slightly at odds with the cinder block walls, but his voice matched the room. "We're here to make feeding small humans less of a riddle," he said, and the laugh around the room was permission, not flattery. He didn't perform jargon. He named it, then translated. "If you can't read the label, it's not you failing the test. It's us writing a bad one." Slides moved, ingredient lists, allergen alerts, the subtle cruelty of fine print. Nia kept her notes clean, bullet points like steps on a staircase. When the presenter asked for questions, the room did that thing rooms do, looked around for a volunteer. She raised her hand. "2 questions," she said, steady. 1. How do you calibrate sweetness when kids' palates are trained by sugar they didn't choose? And 2, what's your plan for trust beyond the package? Because we promise from a company sounds like trust me on a second date. A couple of heads turned. The presenter blinked, recovered, smiled because he'd wanted a real question all morning. He talked formulations and gradual reductions, cited studies like stepping stones. On the second point, he faltered a beat and glanced at Jay. Jay didn't step to the mic. He stepped closer to the room. "We're trying to earn trust on Tuesdays after daycare," he said. "We'll mess up if we think it's a campaign. It's policy, It's being boring in the right way, consistent. The label can tell the truth. So can a brand that says, we changed this because you told us to. We'll publish what we learn, and if we're wrong, we'll say it in a font you can read from the doorway. Laughter again, softer. Heads nodded not at him, but at the possibility of a company behaving like a person with a conscience. Naya watched him speak and felt the particular relief of a room not being sold to. She jotted 3 words in the margin, tell it plain. During the break, while toddlers made a small city out of folding chairs, Jay found her by the coffee urn. You made my team both nervous and grateful, he said, accepting a styrofoam cup like a penance. Good, she said. Nervous keeps people from lying by accident. He winced, appreciative. You always talk like this? Only when my filter's off and the coffee's honest. They walked the perimeter, pretending not to look at the samples. He pointed at a pouch with a proud designer's color story. Still space food? Less Mars, more pantry, she allowed. Progress. Progress, he repeated, as if cataloging the word under something other than metrics. A small body collided with his thigh, Ava, bee backpack buzzing, cheeks wind-kissed. A sitter hovered behind, breathless. She negotiated her escape from the playground with legal precedent, the sitter announced, then waved off payment and vanished into the kiddie melee. Ava attached herself to Jay's knee with the tenacity of ivy. Then she looked up and saw Nia, and her entire face did that opening children do when a familiar story appears in a new place. "Miss Nia!" she breathed, as if naming a character who'd stepped off a page. Reporting for swirl duty, Nia said, because it seemed right to translate the world into their shared terms. They moved as a small constellation toward the back, where a children's corner had been carved out of linoleum. A rug printed with roads that led nowhere, a dented bin of blocks, a basket of picture books with corners softened by teeth. Ava went for the bin, dumped it with glee, then thrust a book at Nia. "Read the elephant one," she commanded, then softened it with, "Please." Nia sat cross-legged, dress folding into a tidy lap, and began. She gave the elephant a voice just a bit too big for the room and the mouse a courage that didn't apologize. Jay sat beside them, knees up, the line of his suit admitting defeat to the floor. When Nia turned a page, Ava leaned in and inhaled like a connoisseur. "She smells like flowers," she informed the air, then to Nia directly, serious. "Not fakey, the good kind." "Lavender," Nia said, "a very bossy plant." Jay's mouth tightened for half a second, something like a memory catching on a nail, then released. He met Nia's eyes and nodded, grateful for the ordinariness of a child's accuracy. After the workshop, the afternoon pretended to be spring with a sincerity that charmed even the suspicious. The library was 3 blocks away, the kind with a fish tank and a bulletin board that bled flyers. "We stop there on Saturdays," Jay said, as if offering a map to a place that didn't ask too many questions. "Fish that look bored, books that don't." "Books that don't is a good policy," Nia agreed. She hesitated the way people do when their life and someone else's are about to overlap in public. Then she said yes without making it a plan, and the 3 of them walked, bee backpack bouncing, Jay's stride choosing to be measured, Nia matching and not matching on purpose. The library air always felt cooler than honest, a state-sanctioned chill that kept paper living long. The fish tank hummed. Blue fish wrote their cursive along rock and plastic castle. Ava pressed both hands against the glass and informed each fish of its name. "This is Biscuit, and this is Biscuit 2, and this is Biscuit 3 because I ran out." "An elegant taxonomy," Nia said solemnly. They drifted to the children's corner. Naya pulled Last Stop on Market Street and a book about a rabbit who worried himself into competence. She read them both, modulating like a train conductor with feelings. Other parents migrated toward the sound without deciding to. Jay listened with that performanceless attention that had become, for Nia, a landmark. Eyes soft, jaw unclenched, body remembering how to be a place where small people rest. When the rabbit finally stopped fretting long enough to help, the room exhaled with him. At the end of the second book, Ava made the declaration of all content children. "Again," she said. "One more," Nia bargained. "Then we let the fish write letters in peace." "Fish don't write letters," Ava scoffed, then reconsidered. "They write bubbles." "Fair," Nia conceded. "Bubbles are a kind of letter if you read with your eyes squinty." Jay watched the negotiation the way you watch a craftsperson work, part admiration, part relief that someone knows how to do this thing you care about. On a low shelf, his hand brushed a pamphlet about the adult education program. He picked it up, slid it toward Nia without comment. She glanced, scanned, and tucked it into her tote with a motion practiced enough to be instinct. No speech, no promise, a seed in pocket soil. On their way out, the March light went sideways in gold. On the library steps, Jay said, "Thank you," like a line he didn't want to leave to chance. "For what?" Nia asked, not coy, just trying to name the thing right. "For asking better questions this morning, for reading the rabbit like the stakes were real, for smelling like a bossy plant." He almost laughed and didn't. "For making a room where my kid forgot to be careful." Nia swallowed the quick heat in her throat. "She's allowed to be loud," she said. "So are you, when you're ready." He nodded. The nod felt like a promise he made to himself, not to her. In the days that followed, the shift was not cinematic. It was granular. Jay came by the cafe more, but not to linger performatively. 15 minutes here, 9 there, a square of sunlight borrowed for a laptop or nothing at all. He started answering a single email each morning without a subject line. Just the words "tell it plain" in the body, a reminder to himself with the authority of borrowed handwriting. His team noticed meetings ran shorter and landed truer. He said, "I don't know," twice in 1 week, and didn't die. Naya, on her side of the counter, doubled her tips without changing her smile. Turns out listening had compound interest. The clinic posted an internal note about a lead coordinator opening with tuition support attached. She printed it at the library, the ink still damp as she slid it under the magnet on her fridge shaped like a peach. Late at night, she read the adult ed pamphlet again, lips moving over requirements, deadlines, the arithmetic of hours she did and did not have. She opened her notebook to the columns, must, and maybe. Under maybe, she wrote the class name. Then, because she'd learned something about the way a day will argue with you, she moved it to must and did not apologize. A routine began to lace itself through their week. Wednesday cocoa, Saturday fish tank, Jay's texts labeled not with pressure but with weather, square of sunlight day, and Nia's replies naming her temperature, light through the blinds. Sometimes the only words they traded were Ava's, biscuit 3 learned to share, please advise, and a photo of a cinnamon roll surgically bisected. It was enough. It was more than. One night, after close, Nia unscrewed the lavender sugar Jay had left and dusted a whisper over a cappuccino she made for herself, a forbidden luxury she justified as R&D. The perfume rose like a memory making its case. She took a sip and thought of Grandma Ola calling mornings by their right names. Tomorrow, she decided, would be a patient beat day. She would print the application. She would ask her manager for a letter and not make it a production. She would count her cash envelope and believe in arithmetic as a kind of faith. On the walk home, the city had the decency to glitter. A saxophone climbed the same stubborn phrase and got it right on the 5th try. A bus sighed, forgiving the late. On her stoop, she paused the way she did sometimes now, not to speak to the moon, but to let the night answer back. In her pocket, her phone buzzed once. We found a better color. Less Mars, more pantry. Good note, Jay. She smiled into her scarf and wrote back without ceremony. Tell it plain. Then she went inside to the jar by the sink and the dress on the chair and the note in the wallet that didn't need to raise its voice to tell the truth. The shift was happening in the smallest units of time. It felt like the first middle bite of a spiral. The library's fish tank hummed like a friendly machine, blue fish writing their slow cursive along the plastic castle. Saturday again, coats peeled, cheeks thawed. Ava pressed her nose to the glass and announced, "Biscuit 3 learned bubbles," as if issuing a press release. Nia laughed, then glanced up when the door breathed in a new pocket of perfume and winter air. A woman in a camel coat crossed the children's room with the self-possession of someone used to being listened to. Hair fell in careful waves. Her smile was warm the way stage lights are warm, bright, a little distant. "Jay," she said, already smiling for him. "Good, I caught you." Jay's shoulders moved a millimeter, enough for Nia to see he had braced. "Hey, Paige." Publicist, Nia guessed before introductions arrived. The woman's eyes did a quick sweep. Ava the fish, Nia, then came back as if she'd filed the necessary notes. "I've got mock-ups for the launch. Paige said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, though nobody here threatened brand strategy. We're leaning into purpose, single dad resilience, little Loom's heart, community. With the right images, we can make this story sing. Her attention finally landed on Nia as if discovering a prop in excellent condition. Hi, she said, friendly, practiced. Paige Marino. We handle comms for Jay's World. The phrase sat on the shelf between them, neat and labeled. Nia said, because there is power in naming yourself out loud. Lovely, Paige murmured, already mentally placing them by a window with good light. We'll keep it organic, of course. Library vibe, cafe vibe, father-daughter vibe. She tapped the folder under her arm. The public loves a love story. I'm not, Jay started. A prop, Nia finished in her head, swallowing the metallic taste the word left behind. She smiled at Ava, who was counting bubbles, and let her gaze drift back to Paige with a politeness that did not invite more. We'll talk Monday, Paige told Jay, turning the comment into a calendar entry. Let's shape this before it shapes us. After she left, the room remembered it was a library. Sound settled. Jay looked at Nia as if he wanted to pull words out of the air and make them useful. He didn't get the chance. The moment folded itself away under a fish's slow blink. By evening, something else arrived. Quicker, colder. A photo surfaced on a blog that thrived on proximity and invented intimacy. Grainy but flattering. Jay at the cafe with his laptop, Ava asleep across two chairs, Nia's hand resting near a tiny sneaker, the way you rest your palm on a ledge to keep a thing from rolling. The caption did the math wrong on purpose. From boardroom to barista, Hale's new muse. The paragraph beneath practiced a chirpy tone that still managed to slice. The comments performed confidence as fact. People with avatars declared verdicts on strangers' lives. Some remarks carried the stale breath of class assumptions. A few swerved uglier and then were deleted, but not before that specific sting found its way under skin. Naya's phone buzzed until it felt like it might vibrate through the table. Friends texted question marks. An old coworker sent, "You okay?" Her manager called. "Honey," she began, voice kind and already apologizing. "We're getting calls. Folks asking if we're that cafe. Photographers came by. I hate this, but we need to. Can you take a week just until it calms down?" The words were careful. The engine beneath them wasn't personal. It was rent, payroll, the fragile balance small places held onto in a city that liked to tip the table. "Of course," Nia said, because she understood people trying to keep doors open. After she hung up, the apartment felt too loud with quiet. She set the phone face down and watched the way the candle flame held itself together. Pride rose fast, protective, ready to argue with the entire internet. Dignity, calmer and stronger, took her hand. She picked up her bus pass, then put it down. She folded the navy dress over the chair back where it had been keeping vigil, then unfolded it again and rehung it like a banner she refused to lower. She washed the mug with strawberries because action was an answer, however small. Jay texted at 9:10. "I'm so sorry. I'm handling it." She stared at the words until the screen dimmed. At 9:17, another, "That post is coming down." At 9:23, "Please pick up if I call." The phone rang. She didn't. Not because she wanted to punish him, but because her heart needed the noise to shrink before she invited his voice into it. Across the river, Jay stood in a kitchen with lights too bright for apology. He had that folder Paige had pressed into his hand and the blog link open, throat tight. "Who leaked it?" he asked the air. Then the thread of emails that led squint by squint to a freelance contractor who had decided access was a story. He called Paige. "It comes down," he said. "Not loud, just final. And we don't turn people I care about into content. Not now, not later." "They already did," Paige said, not unkindly. "We need to get in front of it. We need to be the kind of company that doesn't exploit it," he answered. He surprised himself with how fast the sentence arrived. "Draft me a statement that says we asked for the post to be removed and that we won't be feeding this, and find a way to say, 'Leave her alone,' without saying her name." "Jay," Paige warned gently, "silence becomes story too." "Then let the story be that we chose to be boring about other people's privacy," he said. "I can live with that headline." He fired the contractor. He canceled a brainstorm titled "Lean into Heart" that had sprouted overnight like mold. He typed and erased 3 messages to Nia that said too much and too little. When he finally called and she didn't pick up, He set his phone down like something that needed to cool and looked at the refrigerator door where Ava's drawings lived. Crayon people held hands under suns that took up half the page. He pressed his forehead to the cold and breathed until his ribs remembered how to fall and rise without clattering. Sunday morning, a paper bag landed at Nia's door with the soft thump of care dressed as groceries. Eggs, bread, soup, a jar of good honey, a small bouquet of lavender in brown paper like a joke whispered to a friend. No note except a receipt with a line through the total. She didn't open the door right away. She sat with her back against it and traced the grain with her thumb, counting the lines like rings. When she did bring the bag in, she arranged the lavender in a jelly jar by the sink and told herself it was fine to accept food from a neighbor when the world acted foolish. Pride grumbled. Dignity nodded. Her manager texted again to say a TV crew had shown up and been politely escorted outside by a regular with shoulders like a refrigerator. The image and the loyalty under it made her laugh in spite of everything. Then the rent reminder pinged. She made a list. What she could cover now, what she would cover in 3 days, who she might ask for an extra afternoon at the clinic this week. She underlined the night class deadline and circled it as if circles could slow time. In the afternoon, she walked to the park without aim, hands deep in her coat pockets, the lavender tucked there like a small, stubborn prayer. Parents pushed strollers, teenagers performed nonchalance, a dog found a stick and proposed marriage to it. The carousel horses waited behind glass with their painted patience. Nia sat on a bench and practiced not apologizing to the air for taking up space. Her phone buzzed again. "Jay, can I see you? No cameras, no agenda. She put the phone back without reading the rest. Birds negotiated a branch above with more grace than most press releases. The blog post sputtered, then came down. A follow-up attempted to frame the removal as intrigue. Jay's statement landed instead, a boring paragraph about privacy, community, and choosing not to turn personal moments into marketing. Commenters yawped anyway, because yawping cost nothing. He closed the browser and opened a spreadsheet because a company still needed running even when your life asked to be human. That night, the apartment's quiet returned as a companion instead of a critic. Nia cooked eggs soft, buttered toast, ate at the table with the candle and the jar of lavender, deciding to look like it had always belonged there. She opened the adult ed pamphlet and filled out the application in her neat script, stopping twice to breathe when the part about tuition asked for numbers that felt like cliffs. She wrote her manager's name in the reference line and pictured the woman's 3 heart emojis, which she had once found excessive and now found evidence of a person trying. She slid the form into an envelope, addressed it, set it beside her bus pass. Only then did she text Jay. "I'm okay. You don't owe me fixes." He responded too fast for the sentence not to have been waiting. "I know. Tell me what you need." She stared at the lavender, at the way its purple insisted even in bad light. "Time," she typed. "I need the noise to shrink." "Okay," he sent back. "I'll turn some of it down where I can." "Thank you," she wrote. "You're welcome," he answered. Then, "I'm sorry, not the PR kind." She put the phone face down, not to shut the world out, but to hold this version of it steady. In the next room, the navy dress hung like a stubborn truth she hadn't handed over to anyone's story but her own. On the fridge, the job posting sat under the peach magnet, waiting for morning. The kettle would sing at 5:20, the bus would argue, the milk would want its song. Between all that, the crack that had opened would need tending. She could do that. She had mended worse with less thread. Before sleep, she unfolded Grandma Ola's note and read it the way people read verses into the quiet between heartbeats. "You are not small." She put it back, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness be gentle enough to tell the truth. The week stretched like cooling caramel, slow, sticky, threatening to harden into a shape she hadn't chosen. Nia kept her phone face down, unless rent or shifts called its name. She took an extra afternoon at the clinic, coaxed authorizations from hold music, kept a tote of snacks for parents who hadn't eaten, and let her voice be the room where people didn't have to apologize for needing. The cafe's manager sent a heart and a promise. "Next week, I swear." And Nia believed her because the woman always refilled the sugar before anyone asked. At night, the adult ed application sat on the table beside the jar of lavender sugar and the peach magnet schedule like a little camp of decisions waiting for their tent stakes. On Wednesday, the air changed before the weather did. Nia knew it by the way strangers' glances lingered half a breath too long. A glossy profile ran, Jay in a navy suit, Ava in a yellow sweater, Little Loom's logo haloed by helpful fonts. The headline called him resilient and purpose-driven, words that behaved themselves until they were asked to pose. The piece didn't name Nia, but the paragraph that mentioned a neighborhood cafe and a barista who reminded him that trust is built on Tuesdays blurred a photo just enough to be legal and not enough to be kind. The comments dusted the air again, admiration dressed as ownership, critique dressed as concern. The sentence that landed like grit in Nia's eye came near the end, a quote from a source close to the brand about the new muse. She didn't have to know which room had birthed that phrasing to know it wasn't hers. Her phone buzzed itself hoarse. She let it. On her break, she stood in the clinic's stairwell and pressed her palms flat to the cool paint until belly-deep steadiness returned. She read the profile again, slower, like you read a contract you didn't get to mark up. Jay had said true things. Labels should be plain, companies should be boring about privacy, but truth set in a frame someone else chose could still feel like a trick. By evening, a woman at the bodega looked at Nia, looked down at the magazine on the counter, and smiled the way you smile when you think you're complimenting. "You with that CEO?" she asked, conspiratorial. "Good for you, baby. Secure the bag." Nia felt heat lick the back of her neck. "I'm securing my rent," she said mildly, paid for her milk, and left. Outside, February inhaled and forgot to exhale. She walked into it anyway because that's how sidewalks work. Jay called. She didn't pick up. He texted. "I didn't approve that line. I'm trying to pull the online copy." She stared at the lavender sugar jar until the flecks inside looked like snow, choosing to fall slower. At 9:12, she texted back. "I read your good sentences. The other ones do too much." He replied, "I told them no more muse. I told them you're a person, not content." She wrote, "Your world leaks on me." He came to her stoop the next evening with a paper bag and the look of someone visiting a hospital at night. Inside the bag, bread again, a single cinnamon roll with its middle intact. "I'll stop with the carbs if you tell me to," he said, attempting a joke and not managing it. "I'm not mad at soup," she said. They sat hip to hip on the top step because the bench belonged to the block and they were just borrowing it. The street performed its routine, buses sighing, teenagers parading, a dog dragging Joy toward a lamppost. "I said no," he started without preamble. To the extra photos, to the angle, to Paige's plan to soft launch a narrative. I said the word privacy so many times I forgot what it felt like in my mouth. Then I read it, and some of what I said was still there, but sanded into something that shines wrong. I'm sorry. "I know," Nia said. The words felt clean saying them. "I believe you wanted to do the right thing. I also believe your world has a habit of turning people into metaphors." He flinched, not at the accusation, but at how accurate it was. "I can't stop all of it," he confessed, voice low. "I can make choices that don't feed it. I can lose deals over it. I did." She turned, the soup bag between them like a chaperone. "Lose?" "A partner who wanted us to humanize at scale," he said, rolling the word humanize like it was something that needed its mouth washed. "We walked. The CFO used new words for old math. The board used old words for new fear. And I'm the variable they'd like to solve," Nia said. "Not a question. A weather report." "I'm the one who chooses," he countered, finally letting the steel in his spine talk. "I choose not to feed the machine my life, or yours, but I can't promise other people won't still try to eat." "Exactly," she said softly. The softness wasn't forgiveness, it was precision. "I can't live inside your promise. I have to live inside my rent and my job, in a neighborhood where a woman at the bodega thinks I'm auditioning for a life she understands better than mine." A siren rehearsed 2 blocks away and then gave up. He stared at his hands, thumbs chewing at each other, the way a person stalls before building a sentence that might not survive contact with air. "Tell me what to do," he asked. Not the CEO, just a man who wanted instructions because love, even before its name, makes pragmatists of us. She reached into her coat pocket and brought out the adult ed envelope, thick with forms and her careful handwriting. "Mail this," she said, half smile failing to soften the ask. "Not for me. For you. So you understand what I'm choosing." He took it like a relic. "You're choosing you," he said, as if testing the phrase for weight. "I'm choosing a room where no one can turn me into a case study," she answered. "I'm choosing to be ordinary on purpose. I want you in the room. I do. But I need the room to be mine first. If your world keeps trying to put a lens between me and my own life, I'll start performing without meaning to. I don't survive that." He closed his eyes and nodded once, like someone signing a document he'd written himself but still had to reread. "Okay," he said. What does space look like that isn't just an exit dressed up polite?" "Clear edges," she said. "No drop-bys, no texts past good morning unless it's about Ava and the library. No pictures, no statements, even noble ones, that give anyone a reason to say my name. We meet in places that don't have chandeliers and cameras pretending not to be cameras. We give this thing we're not naming time to be strong enough to survive our caution." "And if it doesn't?" he asked, asking the only brave question left. "Then we honor that it taught us how to treat rooms," she said. "And we say thank you to the kindness that started it, and we don't retroactively call it a mistake." Ava's name had been hovering politely over the conversation, waiting for its turn. He lifted it into the air. "She asked if you were going to be the person who reads the rabbit book forever," he said, eyes glinting with the kind of wet that only shows up when your child's sentences rearrange your organs. "I hope so," Nia replied, feeling the hope like a cord she could pull without breaking it. "But I won't be a forever that hurts her when headlines decide to play dress-up." He nodded again, another signature on another form no lawyer had drafted. He took the envelope and slid it under his coat, as if the mail could be a sacred ritual if you carried it right. They sat for a while with the kind of silence that knows its job, companion, not judge. When he stood, the paper bag rustled between them. He handed her the cinnamon roll. "Middle first," he said, managing to make it almost light. "Middle first," she echoed. He hesitated, then held out his palm. In it lay the smallest sprig from the lavender bouquet, crushed from his pocket, scent rising anyway. "For mornings," he said, "so they start softer even when I'm not the one humming." She took it and didn't hide that her fingers shook a little. "For mornings," she agreed. After he left, she went inside and taped the adult ed envelope to the door so she'd hit it with her shoulder on the way out and be forced to remember to mail it. She unscrewed the lavender sugar and dusted the tiniest constellation over the toast she didn't plan to eat, then ate it anyway because rituals need practicing. She moved the jar from the counter to the top of the fridge, not out of sight, just high enough to make her reach for it on purpose. She set the cinnamon roll on a plate and did not take the middle first. She waited. Waiting, she'd learned, is also a choice. Across the river, in a kitchen that knew both grief and waffles, Jay wrote a resignation email he didn't send to a partner who had called him sentimental. He deleted it, replaced it with the sentence Nia had given him, "Tell it plain," and hit send. He stamped Nia's envelope at the corner post office where the clerk wore acrylics like stained glass and looked at him over the rims with the exact amount of mercy strangers grant each other at 8 p.m. He walked home holding no phone, no folder, just the small permission of doing one correct thing without broadcasting it. For 2 days, they did not talk. He texted good morning and got back light through the blinds. She sent a photo of a fish writing bubbles, and he replied with a picture of pancake batter trying for circles and failing into heart shapes. The world kept trying to be loud. They practiced quiet like a craft. Then, because breaking points don't like to be tidy, the sitter called on Tuesday at 3:12. Ava had a fever. Jay's calendar said investor tasting. His ribs said daughter. He chose the ribs and ran. Nia at the clinic saw his name flash on her screen, and without thinking of any rule but one, answered. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and resolve. "She's burning," he said, voice already on the move. "I'm on my way," Nia said, and started. Urgent care smelled like lemon cleaner and the ache of waiting. The TV in the corner mouthed a weather report with the sound off. A fish print on the wall pretended the room belonged to children. Jay paced under fluorescents that made everyone's skin the same tired color, the weight of his jacket crooked over one arm. Ava lay across 2 vinyl chairs, cheeks flushed, curls damp at the edges, her small palm hot on his forearm. A nurse with a badge that said Gloria called a name that wasn't theirs. The clock did its slow arithmetic. Naya arrived in her coat and the navy dress under it, breath visible from the cold, tote bumping her hip. "I'm here," she said, not loud. She kneeled so her eyes were level with Ava's. "Hey friend, how's the cocoa expert?" "Head hot," Ava managed, voice papery. "Bubbles slow." "We'll fix the bubbles," Nia said. She reached into the tote and produced a digital thermometer, a small bottle of water, applesauce, a paperback with a rabbit who worried and then figured it out. She slid into the chair beside Jay, the kind of nearness you don't have to discuss to feel. "When did it start?" "Daycare said after nap," Jay said, words coming out clipped around fear. 1:02 at home. She wouldn't touch water. Naya pressed the thermometer to Ava's temple. The number blinked, decided. 101.8, she reported, voice steady as a counter. "We're okay." She glanced at Jay's hand, shaking, and put hers over it for one count before letting go. "We're okay," she repeated, letting the second sentence mean him. Gloria reappeared, calling "Hail" in a tone that had ferried 1,000 worries across this threshold. Nia stood with them, habit tucking her into the geometry of medical rooms. She addressed Gloria by name because names loosen rooms. "Can we get acetaminophen?" she asked. "She's 3, 28 pounds. The numbers lived in her like recipes. "Tylenol chew," Gloria said, already moving. "Doctor will be in." In the curtained room, Nia unzipped her tote again and pulled out a washcloth wrapped in wax paper. "Lavender Brigade," she whispered to Ava, who half smiled because rituals have gravity. "Grandma trick. Bossy plant." She dampened the cloth at the sink and laid it across the child's forehead. The scent climbed into the fluorescent light and made it fractionally less cruel. Ava's breath slowed. Jay leaned against the wall and watched the way Nia's hands made order. A small, informed choreography that said we will not be bullied by this moment. The doctor came, kind eyes, efficient hands, ears clear, throat pink, lungs fine, viral, likely, fluids in rest and cartoons, Tylenol now, stagger with ibuprofen, watch the night. He spoke in the gentle staccato of someone who knew the difference between panic and vigilance. Naya translated anyway because translation is care. We keep her drinking. We keep her comfortable. We don't have to be heroes. Jay held the tiny chewable tablet while Ava debated texture versus trust. "Middle bite first," Nia said, and even in fever, Ava giggled and obeyed. The laugh unknotted something in Jay's chest. He reached for Nia's shoulder and didn't touch, then did, a brief, honest landing of palm to fabric that said more than "please stay." They waited while the number on the thermometer practiced humility. When it blinked 101.2, Nia exhaled for the first time in 40 minutes, and Jay noticed he'd been syncing his breath to hers like a metronome he hadn't set but needed. He thought of boardrooms and tasting rooms and calendars that judged you. None of those had taught him how to listen to a machine that made numbers into news about a child's body. Nia had in silence. Discharge papers. A sticker Ava stuck on Nia's coat instead of her own. The sliding door that opened to a street evening and honest air. The pharmacy line a short half hour that behaved. Nia read dosage instructions with the same attention she gave novels, then tucked the paper into the tote with a folded precision that felt like protection. Outside, the city's cold had softened to something you could breathe without bargaining. On the corner, a blue mailbox waited with the patience of steel. Naya stopped. "Hold this," she said, handing Jay the tote. She took the envelope from her coat pocket, the adult ed application he'd carried under his jacket 2 nights before and left on her kitchen table like a promise he wouldn't perform. She slid it into the slot. The metal mouth took it with a sound that made Jay feel 10% braver. She glanced at him, a small, almost smile. "For mornings," she said, as if mailing could be a weather pattern. "I want to be the person who doesn't make your life louder," he said, not cautioning himself into PR phrases. "Today, I wanted to be here first, and I wasn't." The honesty knocked into the place where guilt lives and asked it to leave. "You chose her over a room with charcuterie and investors," Nia said. "That's the first part of the story I'm willing to say out loud." He laughed, a shaky thing that still counted. "I left cheese for you. Now I know it's serious." They cut through the park on the way home because the path was shorter and because the carousel lights were on behind their glass and light is its own medicine. Ava perked up enough to narrate the horse colors, then wilted against Jay's shoulder, thumb finding the corner of his collar with the muscle memory of toddlers everywhere. They sat on the bench across from those painted animals, silent together in the good way. I thought love would be a rescue, Jay said after a while, speaking to the lights more than to Nia. Something cinematic, grand. But it's this, isn't it? Standing in fluorescent rooms together and knowing where the good spoons are and which nurse you can ask by name. It's also the rent on the first, Nia said, and the bus being late when you promised a child the fish tank, and fixing a pipe under a sink because waiting for the super means losing the morning. She looked at him, the carousel gems throwing small galaxies onto his jaw. Rescues are noisy. What lasts is almost always quiet. He nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again, because some truths rearrange you while they settle. I'm afraid, he admitted, of doing this wrong, of asking too much, of you being hurt by rooms I can't always control. I'm afraid of starting to perform, she returned, of forgetting how to be ordinary and then paying for it in a currency I don't have, but I'm more afraid of pretending that fear disappears if we don't name it. Tell it plain, he said. Tell it plain, she echoed. Ava stirred and blinked up at Nia. Miss Nia? I'm here, honey. Are you coming library day? The words dragged at the edges from sleep, but the hope in them was precise. If your daddy says okay, Nia said, passing the baton without making it look like one. She's coming, Jay promised, his mouth finding the shape of a decision that fit. The wind touched the back of their necks and moved on. Somewhere behind them, a drummer started a beat on an overturned bucket and then stopped, as if remembering quiet had a job tonight. Nia switched the tote to her other shoulder. Jay adjusted Ava without waking her. Their hands brushed and didn't make a ceremony of it. The sprig of lavender in Nia's pocket announced itself and then minded its business. They walked the last blocks to Jay's building like people who had learned the city's rhythm enough to improvise. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of someone's dinner performance. In the kitchen, under light that forgave, Nia set water to boil for tea, and Jay found the small bottle of cherry-red medicine. They measured together, the way you measure when a child's night depends on it, level, careful, no bravado. Ava took it like a champ, because the promise of 2 books is as effective as any consultant's strategy. When the child was finally down, lashes making small shadows on her cheek, they stood in the doorway just long enough to make sure the room agreed. Back in the kitchen, Nia leaned against the counter. Edges, she said, reminding them of the agreement they'd built like a fence you can see through. We keep them. Edges, he agreed. I won't ask for pictures. I won't let people use the word muse about you. I won't turn you into a paragraph. Don't promise more than anyone can deliver, she said, not to cut him, but to hold him where he could stand. Promise what you can do. Keep doing it. He touched the ring finger of his left hand out of habit that had nothing to do with marriage and everything to do with the way grief makes your body loop old paths. He dropped his hand and reached for the jar of lavender sugar. For waffles, he said, when mornings let us. For pancakes burned on purpose, she said, because hearts. He laughed softly. Because hearts. When she put on her coat to go, he didn't ask her to stay, and that somehow felt like the sentence that mattered. He walked her to the door, hands empty, a man who didn't know what to do with them when he wasn't carrying a crisis. Thank you, he said. Not for today only, for how you make rooms behave. I didn't make them, she said. We asked them. She glanced past him toward the small room where a child slept, then back. Ask me to coffee tomorrow if the fever holds. Ask me without the world listening. Coffee, he said, as if learning the pronunciation of a foreign word he planned to use often. No cameras, just milk singing. Just milk singing, she agreed. On the sidewalk, the night resembled the kind that doesn't demand a headline. She walked past the blue mailbox that had eaten her envelope and patted its metal side once, a superstitious thanks. At home, she set her phone face down beside the adult ed pamphlet and the peach magnet schedule and the note that kept telling the same truth without getting bored. She turned off the lamp, lay down, and let the day float to the surface of sleep. Somewhere in the city, a fish wrote bubbles that looked like letters to anyone willing to squint. In a kitchen she would return to, The lavender sugar waited in a jar for a morning that would arrive with less noise and more music. Morning looked like it had been ironed. The cafe's light arrived in clean sheets across the floor. The steam wand warmed its throat and began to hum the note Nia trusted most. Jay came in with a hat pulled low, not to hide but to soften. Ava, pink-cheeked but clear-eyed, clutched a library book like a passport. "Fever's down," Jay said, and the relief in his voice made the air warmer than the thermostat did. Nia poured oat milk into the pitcher, tilted the stainless just so, and let the milk sing. The foam lifted obediently. The heart landed on the latte without drama. Simple, centered, whole. "Middle bite first," Ava announced to no one, pointing at the cinnamon roll Nia slid across. Habit made the joke gentle. The joke made the morning true. When they took the corner table, Nia slipped her phone from her apron pocket to set a timer for a break and found the email she'd been pretending not to wait for. Subject, evening certificate, admission decision. Her thumb hovered, then committed. The first sentence opened like a window. "We are pleased to offer you admission. Orientation Monday 6 p.m. Tuition support available pending employer letter." She read it twice because sometimes joy needs repetition to feel legitimate. She pressed her lips together to keep something from spilling and failed a little. The smile escaped anyway. She glanced up. Jay was mid-sip, watching the window as if light required his permission. She didn't wave the phone or shout. She slid a small nod across the room like a secret handshake. He lifted his cup in a quiet toast, the kind you make when you've learned not to scare good news. On her 10-minute break, she texted, "Got in. Mondays wed 6 to 9. I'll ask the clinic for a letter." He replied, "Tell it plain. What do you need me to remove so you can add this?" The question slowed her the way a yellow light does when you decide to obey. She considered her week like a map. Tuesdays and Thursdays were nanny school nights. "Ava bedtime help," she typed. "If it fits. Only if it fits." He sent done. "I'll move the Thursday brand review. We can review labels at 10 p.m. while pancakes burn into hearts." She could see him, half smiling at his own unpolished sentence, and the image gave her a kind of energy coffee doesn't reach. At noon, the clinic filled with winter colds and short tempers. A mother arrived with a baby who found hollering therapeutic. The stroller carried 3 bags, and the night the woman hadn't slept. "Paperwork?" the receptionist asked, already overwhelmed. The woman's shoulders jerked toward defensive. Nia crossed the room with an extra pen and a tone she saved for elevators stuck between floors. "Tell it plain," she said as she knelt beside the stroller. "What do you need right now?" The woman's eyes flooded with the relief of being asked an answerable question. "Water," she said, "and someone to say my kid isn't dying." Nia handed her both, one in a paper cup, one in a sentence with steady skin. In the doorway, the clinic manager watched how the room unclenched. "You free at 4?" she asked later, soft. "I want to talk lead coordinator. Tuition support's real if you want it." Nia nodded once, because anything louder would knock the knees out from under her. Across town, Jay walked into a conference room where the whiteboard had been overused and optimism had been printed in the wrong font. Paige set down a deck titled Heartstrings Q2 like something heavy disguised as something light. "We tap into the narrative," she said, efficient. "Single dad, CEO, community, small moments, a tasteful reveal of the cafe, blurred faces, of course." The words arranged themselves into a cage he could feel on his skin. "No," Jay said, and didn't pad the word. He pushed a different document onto the table, a one-pager he'd written at 2 a.m., black Sharpie over printer paper. "What we changed because you told us." Underneath, simpler labels, QR codes to audits, a public mistakes log stamped with dates and fixes, a community advisory group with childcare and stipends so advice didn't cost moms money. No people as props, no borrowed lives. "This is the campaign," he said. "Boring truth, weekly updates, names only with consent, no muse language, no humanize anything. We don't humanize, we behave like humans." There was a pause long enough to measure careers in. The CFO cleared his throat. "Our partners expect a story." Jay didn't look away. "They'll get one," he said. "It just won't belong to someone who didn't sign up to be content." Paige's mouth made a line that meant both annoyance and admiration. "I can sell boring truth," she said after a beat. "But it won't trend." "Then it will last," Jay answered. He signed the memo that made it policy. Paper, when true, is louder than a press release. By late afternoon, Nia's manager wrote the letter in a neat person's neat font and handed it over with 3 hearts and a hug that smelled like coffee and floor cleaner. At the library, Ava bolted toward the fish and then detoured to the craft table, where glue sticks met paper with the zeal of a new romance. She made a picture with 3 stick figures under a sun that would have failed perspective and passed joy. Over each head, she dictated labels while Nia printed them with toddler-approved block letters. Daddy, me, Nia. Beneath, Ava drew a round object with chaotic spirals. Cinnamon roll heart, she said, proud. Jay watched the pen make a family and bit back the instinct to name it out loud. He trusted the drawing to do that work. On the walk home, March pretended to be April, the way New York sometimes lies kindly. They cut through the park and let the carousel's gold spill on them through glass. I can help on class nights, Jay said, not performing, just logistics. Bath, books, bed. I'll batch investor calls in the morning and move the ops review. We'll eat late. Pancakes for dinner counts as leadership. Waffles would revolt, Nia said, but pancakes are pliable. She bumped his shoulder with hers because shoulder language sometimes holds more than words. In Jay's kitchen, the evening arranged itself with domestic intelligence. Ava narrated bath time to the rubber duck with the solemnity of a minister. Nia poured batter that insisted on making heart-adjacent shapes. Jay uploaded the first entry to the new mistakes page and set a calendar reminder for the second, because systems prevent wishful forgetting. He did not show Nia the page. He did not need her to praise him to believe it was correct. When Ava was asleep, the apartment settled into the good kind of quiet, the fridge's gentle labor, the neighbor's muffled TV, the heat making its case through pipes. Nia leaned against the counter with a mug and looked at the magnetic strip where kindergarten art went to be immortal. She asked me if I'm family, Jay said, not as a test, as a fact that had rearranged his ribs. Nia nodded. She already decided, she said. She just wanted to see if the grown-ups could catch up. He opened a drawer near the stove and showed her what was inside. A ceramic mug with strawberries like her chipped one, a small jar labeled in pencil lavender, a folded dish towel with a navy stripe. I made you a corner, he said. Not a statement. Just space. You don't have to use it. It wanted to exist. The drawer wasn't big. It felt enormous. She reached in and touched the jar, fingertips tapping the lid once. Like knuckles on a door she was ready to walk through. Proof is small, she said. It should be. Big proof breaks. He nodded, relieved at how precisely she'd named the thing he'd been building and afraid of wrecking. I don't know what the word is, he admitted, for what I'm asking. I don't want to run at you with a headline. I want Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the other days that don't have names. I want to be the person who knows how you take your quiet. I want to keep the edges and still be inside them with you. She looked at him the way you look at a place you might move into, noting light, testing floorboards. Then keep showing up when it's fluorescent, she said, and when it's 10 p.m. and the dishwasher sounds like it's confessing. Keep the boring page updated even when no one cares. Don't rescue me from bills or hours. Do rescue me from rooms that confuse noise with meaning. She set the jar back and closed the drawer like a vow lightly made so it could be kept. That feels like a yes you can carry. He didn't reach for her. He reached for the pan and burned a pancake just enough to make the heart undeniable. Because hearts, he said, and she laughed into the mug because joy likes modesty. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The clinic manager, interview Tuesday at 9, tuition support form attached. Proud of you. Nia stared at the words until they made a shape she could set down. She forwarded the form to herself, to the version of her who would be up at midnight printing it at the library. I'm scared, she said, surprising herself with the luxury of saying it while hope was still in the room. I'm scared of failing in public. I'm scared of passing and having to be bigger than I know how to be. Be exact, then, Jay said, borrowing her phrase and giving it back. Be the size you are. Let the world adjust or not. I'll move the chairs. A thin wail sliced the quiet, Ava caught between dreams. Nia set down the mug and was moving before Jay stood, both of them crossing the hall like they'd rehearsed. In the small room, the child rolled, forehead furrowing. Nia hummed, soft, the same tune she'd hummed in fluorescent light. a lullaby that didn't promise anything but steady. Jay put a hand near but not on Naya's back, the near touch that says, "I'm here without borrowing your work." Ava sighed, the sigh of someone deciding to trust sleep again. The room exhaled with her. Back in the kitchen, Jay opened his laptop and pulled up the company site. The new page lived there, plain as an invoice. What we changed because you told us. No photos, no softened edges, dates, decisions, apologies, fixes. He angled the screen so she could see if she wanted. She stepped beside him and read one line. "We mislabeled batch 114. We corrected and notified. Here's how to check," and closed the laptop gently. "That's proof," she said. "That's a better love letter than a billboard." He swallowed, because sometimes praise arrives like water after a long meeting, essential and surprising. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the smallest sprig of lavender, crushed and still bossy. He set it on the counter between them, not as a symbol, as a habit. For mornings, he said, because they'd found a language that kept them honest. When she left, he didn't ask for a picture or a promise. He stood at the door with empty hands and the look of a man practicing a discipline. In the hall, she turned back once, like a person making sure the stove is off. "Coffee tomorrow," she said, "if the milk agrees." "The milk will sing," he said. "I'll keep it on tune." She walked home through a city that had decided to be kind for one night. At the blue mailbox, she pressed her palm to the steel and thought of envelopes traveling without applause. In her apartment, she taped the interview time above the peach magnet and slid Grandma Ola's note out like a card you deal yourself in a game you intend to win slowly. "You are not small." She tucked it back, unscrewed the lavender sugar, and dusted a whisper over the last of the pancakes she'd smuggled home in a napkin. It tasted like a miracle that had chosen to be ordinary on purpose. Tuesday began as a light through the blinds day, the kind that makes dust look like confetti. Nia named it out loud in the kitchen so the room would cooperate, then tied her braids in a smooth crown and tucked Grandma Ola's note into her wallet like a license. The interview was at 9. She left early because nerves prefer extra minutes and because the bus tells time the way storytellers do. On the second step down, her phone buzzed. "Jay, square of sunlight waiting at 10 for Coco." "Ava drew you a fish." He added a photo, blue crayon swirls labeled Biscuit 4 in block letters that looked exactly like concentration. Nia smiled into her scarf. "Tell it plain," she typed. "I'll try." He sent back, "Be the size you are. I'll move the chairs." The clinic's conference room wore the uniform of such rooms, stack of resumes, glass pitcher of water that tasted like storage, chairs arranged to suggest fairness. The manager sat at the end with 2 supervisors and a woman from HR who handled papers, like the future was a thing you could staple. "We want Tuesdays and Thursdays to move faster without losing anyone," the manager said. "Tell us how you'd do it." Naya didn't sell. She described. She talked about names spoken first, not numbers, about the way a parent's shoulders drop when someone admits the form is confusing and offers to fill it together, about calling an insurer back so the authorization lived on the right desk. "We don't shorten time," she said. "We remove friction. Every minute we save is a minute someone can use on a life that didn't plan for today." The supervisors asked about billing codes. She answered without hurrying. HR asked about school. Naya said the night program would be a room she brought her diligence to, not an excuse she'd hide behind. "I've carried trays and appointment books," she said. "I can carry a schedule." When she finished, the manager's face did the small, involuntary upturn of someone trying not to show relief too fast. "We'll be in touch by end of day," she said, which is what people say when process demands its ceremony. Naya shook hands, took the hallway slowly, and only let herself breathe once she hit the street's ordinary noise. She bought a seltzer from the corner store and stood in a patch of sun that had filed no agenda and let its warmth register. Then she walked to the library because the fish tank hummed steadier than her thoughts. Biscuit 4 looked like someone had tried to draw the ocean from memory. Naya pressed her fingertips to the glass just where a blue fish paused, as if to consider the fingerprint. Jay arrived 5 minutes later in a sweater that forgave and a grin he didn't overuse. Ava barreled into Nia's knees with the joy of a person who has never rationed it. "Did you tell the people the forms are mean?" she demanded. I told them the forms need manners, Nia said, and that we do too. Good, Ava approved like a tiny chair of a tiny committee. They read one book because it seemed unkind to walk past the pile without making at least one story earn its ink. On the steps after, Jay squeezed Nia's hand once, quick, the squeeze you give not to stake a claim, but to steady a person who is claiming herself. Cocoa? He asked. A pancake bribe is available, but it's aggressive for a weekday. Cocoa, she said. Pancakes can wait for nights that ask for hearts. By 2, the email arrived. Subject, offer, lead coordinator. The first line was short and decent. We'd be lucky to have you. Tuition support attached. Start date flexible. Nia read it with her hand over her mouth, a reflex born of too many rooms where women are told to make their joy smaller. She didn't. She called the manager and said thank you the way you do when the word is a bridge and also a promise. Then she texted one word to Jay, yes. He called and didn't perform. He let the quiet sit between them for a second so the yes could be heard. Tell me what to move, he said at last. Not just chairs, life things. She thought about it and answered like an index card. Tuesdays and Thursdays, bath and books. Wednesdays, you bring Ava to the cafe only if the day says yes. No PR anything. No pictures of my face anywhere but the fridge by the strawberries mug. You update your boring page even when nobody claps. And when I say I need quiet, you treat it like the fever thermometer telling the truth. Deal, he said, that unpolished word earning more than another syllable would have. That night, the kitchen declared itself a witness. Ava climbed onto a chair with her rabbit book as if auditioning for a role she already owned. Nia stood at the stove, batter in a bowl, lavender sugar waiting like a good roomer. Jay measured without swagger, miscounted once, confessed, corrected. There's a new memo, he said, as if telling the weather. No more muse language. No people-centered campaigns without consent in writing and the right to change one's mind. We post corrections with dates, not vibes. Paige says we won't trend. I told her I'm building Tuesdays. Build Thursdays too, Nia said, mock stern. They get jealous. They have a case, he admitted. They burned the first pancake into an unmistakable heart because they were either talented or lucky. It didn't matter which. Middle bite first, Ava commanded, and they obeyed, because some house laws keep houses standing. After books, too, then the rabbit again, just the worry part, Ava kissed Nia's cheek with a solemnity that made Nia's eyes go hot. Children sometimes officiate ceremonies grown-ups take too long to name. When the child slept, they stood in the door a beat longer than necessary and let the room bless them without having to mean anything magical by it. In the kitchen, Jay opened a slim drawer and revealed a new addition to the corner he'd made, a toothbrush in its paper sleeve, navy stripe like the dish towel. You don't have to, he began. I know, Nia said, taking it. Edges and drawers. She slipped it into the ceramic cup beside the strawberries mug, like someone placing a small flag no one else needed to salute. I reserve the right to change my mind. You reserve the right to ask before assuming. We keep the policy as boring as your page. Deal, he said again, the word comfortable now. She took off her coat and didn't put it back on. The apartment smelled like pancakes, paper, a child's shampoo that insisted on being cheerful. She opened the fridge and found a note stuck under the peach magnet, Jay's handwriting careful. What we changed this week. Label font bigger, QR audit live, errors log fixed, a typo because irony. We can add Nia job, he said, appearing at her shoulder with a Sharpie, awaiting permission. Add Nia job, she said, and we didn't make a spectacle. He wrote both. The Sharpie squeaked and made it official in the way ink does. They ate late, standing, because some victories don't like chairs. Nia touched the jar of lavender sugar on the counter and thought of all the kitchens where someone had become themselves a little more bravely under light like this. She thought of Grandma's hands pressing hers to the table. She thought of the bistro's empty chair and the pasta arrival and a sentence written in pencil, people don't always see. She reached across the small distance and took Jay's palm, flipping it up, laying the lavender sprig she'd been carrying all day onto that map of lines. For mornings, she said. For mornings, he returned, closing his fingers without squeezing, as if protecting a thing that works better when not gripped tight. He didn't kneel. He didn't reach for a velvet box. He did a simpler thing that fit the room. He opened his calendar on the counter and, with deliberate care, created an event titled Twos and Thurs: dinner, bath, books, cocoa, quiet. He invited Nia and Ava. He set it to repeat with no end date and turned off notifications because love doesn't have to ping to exist. I can't promise trend lines, he said. I can promise this square of the week. It's the square I asked for, she said, and the only one you can give honestly. They cleared plates without ceremony, the sink obliging with a sound like contentment. At the door, he didn't ask for a picture. He asked, "Coffee tomorrow?" She tilted her head, listening for the milk's answer in a room 2 miles away. "The milk will sing," she said, "as long as we keep it on tune." Outside, the city had the decency to be exactly itself. Sirens at a distance, a bus sighing, someone practicing trumpet 3 apartments over, and getting the high note wrong twice before finding it. On her stoop, Nia took Grandma's note from her wallet and read it to the night once, because blessings held up better when aired. "You are not small." She slipped it back in with her bus pass and the bistro receipt, and let the stack feel like a spine. In his kitchen, Jay wiped a circle on the counter the way people do when their hands need work to match their insides. He set the new policy memo by the fruit, not because fruit needed reading, but because he did. Where he lived, not only where he led. In the small room, a child dreamed in sweeps and loops. In the drawer by the stove, a toothbrush leaned into a strawberries mug, like a simple, unremarkable future. When morning came, the milk sang. The fish wrote bubbles that could be read as letters if you squinted. A square of sunlight kept its appointment on the cafe floor. Love did not arrive like a rescue. It accumulated like proof. Lavender on wrists, a drawer with a navy stripe, a policy that chose to be boring, pancakes shaped like a heart because someone burned them a little on purpose. They ate the middle bite first. The rest would keep.